Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, October 7th Land Use Committee meeting. We are, sorry, having trouble with my voice this morning. We're going to start by our review of the latest red line draft of our ADU ordinance and discussion on that. And I'd just like to start by saying we've added some comments to the way the ordinance is drafted, and these are not the comments that are on the side and at the very beginning are just there for informational purposes to try to help explain exactly where those changes, why those changes have been put into place, and we'll go through them, and the staff will go through them, but I just wanted to let you know when you're looking at it, the stuff to the side is just explanatory. It's not actually part of the code. So who would like to start us off?
I'd be glad to kick it off.
All right.
So, good morning, Land Use Committee, and our guests today. I would like to just begin with talking about what we heard last time, and then I think I would pass it to Rick to really talk about how the remedies and the sort of responses that we have to, I think, some really good comments. We asked to add the 2 bedrooms back in. I think we had taken that out. There have been discussions back and forth of the 2 bedroom limitation, and I believe that's been added in. There was some questions about, making abutters aware, and we kind of worked through some, trying to keep in mind the original directives of this, or to try and remove barriers where we can and balance that. We did introduce a new feature there to kind of create that informational awareness for abutting properties. There's a question about remedying the home occupation language to make sure that it was very clear who could operate a home occupation, how many could be on site. There's some clarification on section 534 and 35, 10.534, 535. I think that Rick can talk to that. And then I believe, I think those are the big ones that I think those are the big ones that I have, but there might be some. There's also some questions that were brought up about having a really good ADU checklist and an ADU handbook, and helping folks to understand how they would go about getting this. And so I don't know if you'd like to comment on that.
Yep. So just to let everyone know, Beverly has been working extremely hard with me to put in, at the end of September, we've put in for a grant with New Hampshire Housing and that whole portion of money that they were given from the governor's money. Part of that was 6 grants that they're giving out across the state for what they're calling a community housing navigator position. It's a 2-year position, a 2-year grant. We have put in for one of those, and that specific person is going to be able to come in if we're granted that, and write the handbook for the ADU, because we should be hopefully getting close to the end by the time we get this person on board and ready to go. So one of the first things they'll do, on top of being the person who's going to organize all of the outreach with the city and all its residents, plus I think sort of really keeping tapped into the regional aspect of housing and really trying to help us focus and get through the next iteration of changes that we're looking to make in phase 3. On top of that, we're also putting in next week a grant for another for a consultant to be able to come and help us actually write the changes that are in phase 3. So we are looking forward to hopefully getting those grants. I have very high hopes we will. I have very high hopes that our housing community housing navigator will also be able to help us even through PHA and work to really help us direct and really figure out where, take that information that your organization has gathered and really help us figure out what's the right way to move forward.
Part of that job is, part of that deliverable was that interagency and community coordination and coordination with the state, which we don't always have capacity for, and that we always are trying to get a meeting and figure out how we can, better leverage and identify, ways to leverage limited resources. And so I think it would be good to have somebody who's like permanently, at least for 2 years dedicated to that purpose of coordination. And that's how a lot of affordable housing projects get done, through those sort of collaborative processes. You know this. Their capital stacks can be very complicated on those projects. And so I think we all are optimistic on both grants, and I'll be working Monday to finish the second grant. So even though we have the day off, that'll be my big project to work at home on. So anyway, I would like to, given that summary, and I'd like to invite also Rick to mention any other things that I might have missed, that because I don't think I had a full exhaustive list of what we heard, but those are the big things I remember hearing.
Sure. Well, thank you. So as you mentioned, we have this new introductory text in this handout that is really about the summarizing some of the reasons for some of the changes that we made and some of the themes that are in here. But in the use table, one of the changes, I think probably the only significant change since the last meeting, was on page 2, down at the bottom, use 1.222. And just the most complicated part of this is the detached accessory dwelling units. And so before we had 5 different categories. We've folded that down to 4 categories. The first two, 1.221 and 1.222, have to do with creating a detached accessory dwelling unit in an existing accessory building. And the 1.222 is up to 600 square feet, where anything is unusual. It doesn't comply with an existing, with a required dimensional standard, or requires any modification of a standard by the planning board, or it includes any expansion of the existing accessory building. So if, in this framework, if you have a accessory building and you're not expanding it at all, and it's less than 600 square feet, the unit is less than square feet, it would be allowed as of right in those, or by administrative approval, in those districts where it's shown as a P. If any of those conditions doesn't exist, it becomes a 1.222, and that makes it a conditional use permit. And then these aren't changes from the last time, but they're just renumbered. 1.223 and 1.224 are accessory dwelling units that are up to 750 square feet in a new building, or up to 1,000 square feet in a new building, or not complying with the dimensional standards. So these are just different categories. So as I say, the first two are entirely within an existing building. The second two are new buildings. It seems complicated compared to the existing ordinance, but it's really trying to target the regulations to specific types of situations. On page 4, there's a couple of notes. One, there's a reorganization of the entire ordinance into a more logical sequence than we saw last time, and we've created subheads, the ones that are point something zero, like the first one, purpose and eligibility. That category of subhead didn't exist before, and it's really tried to help to make this more logical and to find your way around the ordinance. And then we have this new purpose statement, which hasn't existed. We haven't had a purpose statement in the ordinance up till now, and this is really reflecting what's in the state. I'm not sure whether it's the State Zoning Act or the state legislative statement, but
the Model Act.
The Model Act, yeah. So it's a just trying to say why we're doing this. I understand there's in the next point, 10814.12, there's a recommendation from Rick Chelman to delete the words "one and," so that it now will say only one accessory dwelling unit. But that's not reflected in this text, but it can be made later. So going down through the ordinance, most of the notes on the side are not necessarily reflecting changes from the last time, but they're really kind of the cumulative changes that we've made so far. But I'd like to point you to, skipping way ahead, to page 11. And one of the discussions we had last time was whether the architectural design section should be guidelines or standards, and we've now changed this to be standards. So these are things that have to be determined by the planning director in the case of a P use and as a right use, or by the planning board in the case of a conditional use. And it says that if there's another section further on that says that if the planning director finds that any of these are not met, it gets bumped from a P use to a conditional use. So that's just it's just making this much stronger, the architectural standards. Then on the next page, page 12, we've added a posting notice for the P uses. There's been a lot of discussion from residents about notification if in the case where a public hearing isn't required. And so this language is actually modeled from the similar language in the site plan review regulations. And so before a property owner applies for a building permit to create an accessory dwelling unit, the owner has to post a notice about this on the property and then certify in the building permit application that the notice has been posted as required. And then the next point, as I mentioned before, 814612, that's the place where if the planning director determines that any standard is not met, not just the architectural standards, but any standard, then it goes to a conditional use permit. And I believe those are the only substantive changes that were made since the last meeting. So I've missed something.
I just want to note that it's interesting that, and we do have that caveat about the architectural standards, but the only things that would be allowed with a planning director approval would be where there's really no new external construction anyway.
Correct.
So it's important to note that. I don't know how often that would include any changes to the exterior, but generally, it would always be with an existing building. Did we talk, I don't know if we added it about
I'm going to interject for one moment, because while you're talking about that, one of Corey's questions that came up, and I think it's a fairly good one, because it's under permitted, the detached up to 600 square foot, so basically the old garden cottages, so 1221. He put in it, what about exterior changes such as addition of windows or doors, lights, etc.? Are these changes allowed without needing a conditional use permit? So I think, and that I think that's a question that, since you were just talking about that aspect, I think we as a committee probably have to put into our thought process, is that considered a change that would be something that would trigger a conditional use permit?
Are you talking about 1211?
Yeah.
Adding a window?
1221, yeah.
1221.
What about
1221.
exterior changes, additions of windows, doors, or lights?
The way this is written, that would be a permitted use. It wouldn't require a conditional use
Be
permit.
permitted.
But it would have to comply with the architectural standards
Yeah.
if they did
Yeah.
it. So if they did any of the, and we have rules about the windows and the doors and other architectural features.
And the height of windows
Yeah.
close to property lines, right.
So
Yeah.
there's still standards that are
Okay,
applicable for those.
that was just one of Corey's three
That kind of
questions.
tied into my issue, yeah, that could
Yeah,
happen.
I thought it tied into that question, so I'd bring it up then. All right, sorry to interrupt.
Were there two more from Corey, or?
There are two more if you want to go straight to
Yeah,
them.
because I'm done with the presentation. So.
Okay, so the next one is under 10.814436, so it's detached ADUs. It's about the 33% of any individual roof surface. So his question was, because I don't think we properly defined it, or maybe based off the way it's written, you'll tell me otherwise, is an individual roof surface defined as a roof plane? In other words, does a normal pitched roof have two individual roof surfaces?
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
I thought yes as well, based off of
Is plain a
that.
better word? What, I didn't look at the definitions in the back of the code.
There is no definition, so,
Then
There are no
surface seems-
definitions,
Wanna
so
change
surface
surface?
Let's
seems.
make it plain.
okay.
Yeah.
Which one was that on?
It's-
814436.
Page
Yeah.
10.
It's page 10, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just going to put yes so that I can get back to him and tell him that as well. But yeah, I thought the same thing. It'd be 33% on each side of a pitched roof would be my thought process. And then the
absolutely.
his next point was on page 12, and that's 814611. And he says, how will homeowners ensure this is waterproof and remains legible? In other words, the sign. Will city provide waterproof plastic signs similar to fillable no trespassing signs that a homeowner can fill out? So I guess there was more of a question of how that signage would work.
So how it's normally handled in other jurisdictions is that we go ahead and prepare the sign, they pick it up and post it and send evidence that it's been posted.
And it's the demo review sign, which is not plastic. It's
Yeah.
just got some
Coating.
kind of sealer on it.
Yeah.
It
And then
won't
they-
last for months.
There's a
It'll last.
number to call,
Yeah,
and there's.
it'll make it through a
yeah.
rainstorm.
It could be, so we would have to design that sign, but they would have to pick it up, post it, and then, I guess, pay a deposit fee or whatever, and then if they
Water
were.
Well,
resistant.
it gets thrown away.
Or does it get thrown away?
One
So-
we use now.
We would do it probably the same
I
way
think
then,
so.
however we do it now. Did they have to provide evidence of it that they're
Yes,
supposed to? Okay.
photographic
Okay.
evidence.
That it's been posted in, and we usually give a map about, or we usually, in other places, we've given like direction about where we think it should be posted. Do you do that for demolition committee, or do you say?
That's why we get the photograph. If we don't like where they put it, we ask them to move it.
There you go. That was all of Corey's feedback. So, moving on to people in the room. Rich, do you have any questions or feedback, or
I don't
Comments?
at this moment, no.
do you think this sort of reframing of how we've reorganized it works?
I do. I think it's a lot more clear. Getting rid of the garden cottage. I think it's a lot easier to read. I think it's a lot easier to understand, and I think we're getting a lot closer to that.
The right point.
Yes. that
I think
simple
changing
template.
architecturals from guidelines to standards helps, because then it allows us to use those as points of triggering needing a conditional use permit. So that was.
And the big comment that we have heard very often in public input is that guidebook or handbook. And I do think that could include some sample plans. It just, I think we could have that in there. But I think that will also bring it into an accessible place for folks.
Yeah. Comments, questions? All right, if that is all with that, it would be my intention that we would now start to send this to the planning board with all of the additional comments at the way we have it set up, so that they get all of that feedback as well. And the second part to look at would be the assisted living proposals. Do you guys want to start, and we can go through that?
So, this was also queued up as part of the work plan to get this changed, recognizing that we have a demand for these and looking at the limitations within the code about where these can be cited. I think one of the general places we started at is really understanding, how these really are alike, multifamily in many cases, and and they weren't allowed in many of the same districts. Multifamily was allowed, and then one of the other exercises that we did was really to take also a look at the intent statement for the zoning districts and really understand, recognizing that there may not be land available for many of these in many districts. We defaulted to, instead of looking at that, really trying to understand, is this appropriate for that district? And the market, ultimately may, depending on the demand for these, may adjust, land can be assembled for the purpose. So does this work with the mix of uses in the district? And I think I'll kick it to Rick to just talk about that.
Sure, thank you. So the table is basically the proposed zoning change. The third page here is highlighted, but the first two pages are really the rationale for why each proposed change was made. And as we say, we paired the two different types of assisted living facilities with the corresponding scale of multifamily in the zoning ordinance. So assisted living home, which allows up to 5 residents, is paired with a 3 and 4 unit multifamily development. So, a 4-unit multifamily development might have 8 to 10 to 12 people living in it, and assisted living home up to 5 residents is clearly a smaller structure than that, but it might have the same type of impact, or because it would be larger, perhaps. A single-family home, for example, could have 5 residents living in it, but an assisted living facility for 5 residents would be larger than a single-family home. So we tried to pair that with the small multifamily dwelling, and then the assisted living center with 6 or more residents was paired with the 5 to 8 and the more than 8 multifamily dwellings. And so we just went down through the use table, and wherever on the first page, wherever a small multifamily, 3 to 4 units, is either allowed as of right or by special exception, we looked at that and considered that was a place where an assisted living home could be allowed in the same way. And in the GRA and GRB, right now, multifamily 3 to 4 units is a special exception use. The same is true for assisted living, but as I say, it's probably smaller than a 3 to 4 family multifamily, so we're suggesting that it be allowed as a right use. And again, this is the example that I gave is the Green Guard residence on Brewery Lane. which is larger than a single-family house but comparable to a small multifamily dwelling. In all the other zoning districts, other than GRA and GRB, what is being proposed is for the assisted living home to have the same use designation as the small multifamily, and in all cases, it is it would be as of right. In some cases, it's currently allowed by special exception. In some cases, it's not allowed, and those are more like the business districts. But we thought that that would be appropriate for the assisted living home. Then moving to the next page, the assisted living center, and it says in the zoning ordinance it's 6 or more residents, but in fact, as I point out in the introduction, when you actually look at what this type of facility is, it tends to be much larger than 6 or more residents. It's the average bed capacity across the country in 2016 was 35 beds. Portsmouth, we have Edgewood Center with 156 residents, Clipper Harbor with 102 residents, and then there are 2 newer facilities in Durham that have opened in recent years with 24 and 60 residents. So we're talking about much larger facilities than the 6 or more residents would suggest. And so we've paired that with the multifamily 5 or more units and looked at that here. And so in most cases, this is one of the cases where it's only allowed in a few zoning districts. And the suggestion here is to not look at any of the single residence or the general residence A, general residence B, but we're really starting with general residence C. And if you're currently with multifamily, the 5 to 8 units are allowed by special exception. 8 or more is not allowed, and the current assisted living center is not allowed. And it's proposed to change that to be a special exception. That's one of the areas that might be subject to more discussion, because it could be a larger facility in a very small district. On the other hand, there are very few lots in the GRC that could actually handle a large facility. So if that happened here, it would probably be more in the 6 to 8 or 10 resident type of facility. And then in the garden apartment mobile home district and the CD5, CD4, the Gateway 1, Gateway 2, and the business and CD4W is proposed to have them all by allowed as of right. Those are the existing condition. So the changes that are being proposed are in the MRO, CD4L1, CD4L2, and MRB. And in those cases, it's proposed to go from not allowed to special exception. So I guess the kind of the more significant changes, well, some of them are significant across the board, but the ones that might be more sensitive are in the general residence districts with smaller lot sizes, et cetera. But those are the proposals.
Any questions?
Feedback?
We're just basically trying to pair.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify why the GV district, it's gone from permitted to non on the assisted living center.
Oh, well, as I said, this is like the Spalding
general
Turnpike
business.
Yeah.
and the Route 1 Rotary, and there are no multifamily allowed there, so it doesn't really make sense. And we're talking about areas that are fully developed as car dealerships and motel and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, that's me.
Anything else from you?
I hear that, and I think it's worth considering, maybe beyond today, allowing with a special exception in some of those commercial districts. This is a multifamily use, but it's so drastically different from other multifamily uses, in terms of the center at least.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to think out
Maybe make it
where
by
these
special
things
exception.
exist, and they're often right near highways where people can get on and off to see their in-laws. They're frequently near interstates where a lot of these locations are in the GB. But anyway, I wouldn't go to a P, but maybe a special
It is a
exception. at
P right
least.
now.
Yeah, no, I say maybe we go to a special exception, so
In what district? Nick?
in the one, in the GB.
G-
Is it the GB?
GB, general business.
Yeah, well, it went from a P, yeah, it's a P
So
now.
P to a no, so maybe just make it a special exception instead.
Yeah, so I'm just suggesting that. It keeps the door
No,
open.
'cause I do think there could be some circumstance where a facility could be suitable,
and,
yeah.
and probably better, thinking of the Spalding Turnpike and what we've been looking at for the past 10 years. It hasn't been great for redevelopment or expansion of what's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That change, and it can be, I mean, I guess as we go forward with their, any questions on that, we could certainly queue that up as a discussion item for the planning board.
Yep.
It's referred.
Yep. Does anyone have anything else? Otherwise, I'm going to open up the public. Anyone from the public wishing to come forward and speak, please come. Just state your name and address for the record.
Wow. Good morning, Elizabeth Bratter, property owner, 159 McDonough Street. I guess I didn't get the memo that we're going to look at this too, and I would have appreciated it having shown, I'm not really sure what, if the first column is what exists and the second.
The third page, if you look at the third page, it shows you exactly the table of the changes. Under assisted living centers and
This one,
assisted
you mean,
living.
right?
Okay, now I see it.
Yeah, yeah.
All righty. So I'll look at that another day and send you a letter or something. Come. All right, so I thought I would go through this line by line, sort of, because that's how I did it, the table of uses thing, and you guys can make notes or ignore me, whatever you want to do. So we'll go to page 2 at the top. On the right side in the table of standards, sometimes there's little footnotes that exist, and I thought a footnote for 1.212 should include the maximum there. It says more than, in addition to the expansion. So I think that as I read later on, there was a maximum of 1,000 square feet, and I thought that should be listed there, but I'm not sure. If you go down to 1.221, in this little footnote, there should be something that says a butter notification is needed, because a lot of times when people see P, they say, oh, goody, I can do whatever I want, but that's not true in this case. They do need butter and notification.
Could I just interrupt for a second?
Sure.
If you go to the bottom of page 3, there is, that note number 2 says, it's a reference to that administrative approval, and that's where it says about the notice.
I hear what you're saying, but when I'm reading these, I'm not looking at that. Most people don't even read your notes.
No, but this would be a note in the right-hand column. Where
Oh, well, you're going to put it in there?
That's what I
Okay.
mean.
All right, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that the notes were going to be. I thought they're going to be at the bottom of the page.
No, it says in the supplemental regulations
All right, that's
column.
fine.
Yep.
But again, my thought was it needed to be that simple thing anyway, I just thought it should say there that a butter notification is required. And that says supplemental regulations column, blah, blah. The idea is making it simple. You've got a lot of other stuff in there. On page 3, 1.224, it almost, and it could be just that I'm misunderstanding it, but when I read this, it makes me think that it's a better deal to use the bottom 1.224 than 1.223, and that may be just how I understand it as a layperson, but it almost seems like I can go bigger if I just build a whole new building. But it's just how it reads to me. So if you don't have a complying building, you can go up to 1,000 square feet, but if you have a complying building, your reward is you get to go to 750. It's almost like we're rewarding people who are non-compliant. So it's just something to think about. So when you read that, someone who complies, they only can go up to 750 square feet, but someone who's non-compliant can go to 1,000.
In many more districts. I mean, that's the main difference.
So the difference is that you can't go up to 1,000 square feet in GRC
MR,
or
CD4.
MR. There's
Where
a bunch
it's
of
allowed.
districts you can't do it. So it's more restrictive 1.224 is more restrictive in terms of where you can do something than
Yeah, the-
Okay.
1.223.
It's got to be on a large lot.
Right.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That's fine. All righty. So I just wanted to remind you, because we're going to go further down the list and you're going to find out what I have to say, but the specific purpose of allowing ADUs, and the purpose that the city council gave for doing this was to increase affordable housing. All right, so that's the purpose.
A purpose.
A
Not
purpose.
the purpose, a purpose.
Okay, so I'm going to go further along on that. I just thought the 10814.13, and I'm not really sure if this is a legal thing, it should include all, so it says, in order for a lot to be eligible for accessory dwelling unit, the lot and all existing structures, I think it should say there, and all proposed structures, in addition to the existing structures, shall conform. So it's almost like the wording seems a little odd to me, but that's,
Yeah, it's what was in the existing code. We haven't actually changed it.
yeah.
Is a suggestion to, does
say
it all existing and proposed structures in addition to existing structures? Is that?
Right, I mean, it's all proposed structures and additions to existing. It's not, right, it's,
I just think the wording is odd, just to me.
I think it's meant to
it should be
recognize.
existing and proposed structures with any additions. Yeah, it's hard to make it, I understand what you're saying, but I'm not sure that there's,
So I wrote, this.
I can take a look at
Existing
it.
and proposed.
Yeah,
All existing and
But
proposed.
the thing about it is
but
that
the additions.
many existing would be non-conforming, and so far the position has been that additions must conform, but it would make ineligible many of the garden cottages which are already encroaching. So it does actually create a new barrier. The idea was that if you are expanding, which would already be kicked into a variance and a CUP, that you would have to go through those processes to expand. But we do have structures that already exist in the setbacks and in, so
Right.
that, I think that that actually puts up a barrier that's not there right now.
okay. Like I said, it was just, the reading was odd.
It is kind of worded oddly, and I think that's true for a few things. It's just,
Well, yeah, I
reason,
know,
it's
but
just-
the idea is to make it more simple, and if you're going to fix all of this stuff, you might as well.
one thing, and I think I understand what you're saying, that there's a way to simplify that, is we're trying to work on maybe getting a digital code where we can put notes for the community to help, some explanatory notes as part of the
Yeah, like what we
digital
have on the side here.
Yeah, that would be help folks understand how to interpret sections. That might be helpful. So,
It could be also part of the handbook.
Yeah.
that would be really good.
So at the top of page 5 is in blue, notwithstanding the above, the combination of the principal dwelling unit and the accessory unit does not need to comply with the minimum lot standards so I read that, and I'm pretty familiar with zoning, and I was like, I have no clue what they're talking about. So, again, the point being that this is supposed to be able to be understood, and to me, you're talking about the principal dwelling unit, the accessory dwelling unit, the lot area, the dwelling unit, the minimum lot area. So it just seemed really confusing to me, and I didn't know if there was a way to make that better.
Would it be easier, I mean, and this is not technical language, but, for the purposes of this section, the accessory dwelling unit and the principal dwelling unit shall be considered a single dwelling unit? Because I think that's what we're trying to say, but.
Yeah,
It is
I think
what we're
that-
trying
yeah,
to
that'd
say.
be
It's what's
hard.
in the side.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
But what I'm saying is when you read that, that's not exactly what
Yeah, I
you're
understand.
just like, it's a lot of
I had
gibberish.
to read it a couple times, too. I knew what we were trying to get at.
Yeah,
so,
but you knew what you were doing because you know code. I'm reading that and I'm going, I'm pretty good with this, but I don't understand this.
Just to be, we could delete the last phrase.
I would.
That was kind of the problem.
district.
To just say, delete but must comply with the minimum lot area for the district, because it's kind of a peculiarity of our code is we have two columns for minimum lot area. We've got
Yeah, I
minimum
know.
lot area per dwelling unit. So would it help you if we deleted but must comply with the minimum lot area for the district?
I think that would be helpful. I mean, I think the whole thing is about lot area, and when you go to that section in the requirements, if you look at the section in the
You're
requirement.
elsewhere that you have to meet the minimum lot size.
That confuses me a little bit, because
Yeah.
then I'm saying, are we
Is then
throwing
a
that out the
non-conforming
window?
lot's going to be eligible?
Well, it's because we have this. it's
Well, I mean,
because
you
we have
can
these
look at it,
changes.
the
Yeah.
professionals
Yeah.
can decide what they want to do.
That change makes me think, oh, so it doesn't apply at all.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it still does apply, it just.
Right.
So I guess we.
Let's look at it.
You can look at it and decide how to word that. There's accessory dwelling unit that is not created within it. So 10.814.133 says, is talking about, it makes the reference, if you read the thing on the right, it makes perfect sense. When you read what's being presented, I wasn't sure about that is not created within an existing accessory dwelling and is not an accessory dwelling unit. It is not an accessory building for the purposes of this ordinance. I was like, okay, so what are we talking about? But when you read the merging of the two, then it makes sense. So I didn't know.
The reason that's there is because there was a change, after we adopted the original ordinance, there was a change made in 2018, I think,
Yeah.
that said that a detached accessory dwelling unit is not an accessory building for the purposes of the ordinance. And so if we
That's
didn't have
what
that,
building is
if we didn't have that
the-
phrase in there, we wouldn't need this.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
All
that's
right.
the problem. Accessory buildings and accessory dwellings are two different
Two
things.
different things. And do we have that in the definitions?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yep.
And then I had a concern about the side and the rear yards, because those are usually the biggest issues for neighbors. You know, if you're on a one acre lot, the side yard is usually where the house is. That all has to do with positioning of a house. So I have a 1 acre lot on Clinton Street. The next door neighbor's house is right next to mine. Because they parallel up because of the street frontage, the whole design thing that Nick likes, you know, they all line up in a little row. So my concern is that for those type of lots, the side yard and the rear yard are the most important, especially the side yard.
Right.
So what they put next to my property that I have a 1 acre lot on is very important to me.
Right.
So right now, my neighbor added a garage into my setback. But she got permission, don't worry, we'll talk about that later. But I'm just saying that really, for me, the big issue is when you're on a 1 acre lot or a 5 acre lot, and the houses all line up in the front to give you that street front, it's the side that
Yes.
is the issue. And although it says if you add, but you can have a garage, and then you can add into that garage an accessory dwelling unit on the upper floor, but your garage already encroached in the neighbors, so it's a non-conforming use, but you still have to think about that
Right,
it's
so-
the side that's
right,
the
so
issue.
this is partly because of the garden cottage issue, so.
Yeah, here we
so
go
if we're
again.
saying, right now, if you have a garden cottage.
Yeah.
Which is what you're talking about, because it's in an existing garage.
Garage, yeah.
And you're adding onto the existing garage, that has a different setback requirement than the principal structure. So what we're saying here is, so the existing ordinance has everything in black, correct?
Right.
So the existing ordinance says that a detached accessory dwelling unit that you're creating that is not created in an existing accessory structure, an existing garage, has to meet the side and rear setbacks for a principal dwelling unit. And so so if somebody's building a new structure,
But it says not, and a principal, and not the side rear. That was what.
so that's what it says, the side and rear yard standards for an accessory building are closer to your lot line than the side and rear yard standards for a principal structure. So if you're building a new structure, it seems like it would have been easy to combine these two things, but it becomes somewhat complicated. If you're building a new structure, then you have to comply with the side and rear yard standards as if it were a primary single-family dwelling.
If it's more
Right.
than 100 square feet, which is anything bigger than a garden shed.
Right, right. And so.
Okay, I see what you're doing. So
Yeah.
you're differentiating. those two.
Differentiate, right,
Okay,
exactly,
yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense.
That I did, because I wasn't sure I was.
I know, well, yeah, it's sad to me that I understood that, too. So I just thought on 10.81422 that the minimum, that maybe perhaps list the minimum requirements. Either the principal dwelling unit, accessory unit shall be occupied by the owner. Principal, the owner shall provide documentation to the city of the number of units for his place of residence.
Now,
So-
satisfaction of the city that one of the units is his or her principal place of residence.
Okay, I don't know why I wrote that. What I wanted to see was the documentation. What's the required documentation? The minimum documentation to show that you're living there.
what is it now? Because this is an existing,
It's just a certification that they upload, that we upload to Viewpoint. But I would say that there's been discussion about making it a deed restriction, and if it's operated as an ADU, that it has to be owner occupied, one of the units. And that has been thrown about. We didn't include it, but I think it's still at play. Because it hasn't been chasing down the affidavits, their voluntary affidavits has been,
Right.
it's an extra level of work on the part of staff. So I think, like so many things, I think that could be considered, and
it's done in other jurisdictions because I've seen it, and I would suggest it's probably a good idea so that when it's being sold,
I know staff would be relieved to see that,
yeah,
because it is.
if it's a deed restriction, it's a little bit more
And
straightforward.
it could be that if it is operating as an ADU, that it would have to be, deed restricted, and I think that would make a lot of sense, and I think it would be a little bit of a.
Yeah, because down below, the next one, the ones for trusts, is actually says shall have a principal place of residence of the benefit. I mean, that's really specific. That covers it. And I said the one above, which is the one which is going to be more lucrative for people, needs to be done. So that was that. All right, so 10.814.23, no purpose to increase the housing. Okay, so this is my stick that I want to take out of here. I want this completely removed. Because.
Which one again?
10.814.23.
2-3.
Home occupation.
Okay, because what you're doing is so if I want to add an addition to my garage and put a unit on top that I'm going to use as my office, I have to follow very specific rules and regulations. But what this says is you won't have to follow those rules if you put it under an ADU, follow the ADU things, and then I turn it into my office, and now I have a little dance studio or whatever you want to put in there that falls under that. I mean, the person who spoke last time said that he has his business and his wife has a training business in his home, and it would be great to put an office to create an ADU and do that. And the purpose of the ADU being streamlined and being able to be permitted under certain circumstances was not to create offices, but to create housing units. And to me, it is true that legally you can put in a housing, you can put in a home occupation on your property, but if you present it as an ADU, it should stay as an ADU, or you should have to follow the rules or regulations of adding onto your garage.
But that's adding a business. This is just a home occupation, so this is
Yes,
someone
yes.
working from home.
And you couldn't actually.
Right, but that's, again,
We put there that all the home occupation standards shall be applicable. I mean, because I don't
That's
think
what
It
it's.
says.
Yeah.
That's
I
what
don't
It
think
says.
it's waiving that.
So I think the thing to say about this is that you couldn't, under this provision, create a detached accessory, a detached home business, because you actually have to have your home occupation use in the unit that the owner occupies, and it's limited to what, 25% of the floor area or something. There's some limitation in the ordinance about what a home occupation is. So you actually, if you created an accessory dwelling unit and you didn't live actually in that accessory dwelling unit, you couldn't put it, according to this, you couldn't put a home occupation in
And
there.
if you did, it would be really small.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
okay, all right.
You can't have a separate, this does not allow you to have a home occupation that is not in the unit that you occupy.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, because to me, it said, I can build an ADU, I can call it an ADU, and then I can move my office in there.
No,
But it
no,
says-
that's-
Different,
this is actually
which is
preventing it.
different than
This prevents that.
I build my garage and I add a room on top and I get permission to meet those setbacks for that.
You
So
can't do that. Yep.
You
That
can't.
was, all right. Okay. And in regards to septic systems, I said it goes with New Hampshire water supply, blah, 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 but does that include a consultation with the DPW at all? Because I know in some jurisdictions, people who have septic systems, they're questionable, and the cities can't get to those because there's no reason for them to, but if you add an ADU to a septic system that might be in poor condition, this would be an opportunity to protect the waterways from that. Just something to think about.
So I think there's some protections in place for that, Liz. I think that if an ADU came forward as a CUP, and if they were expanding that, we would always add something that you have to go ahead and get a permit through NPDES for the design, and then they also do a follow-up to review the as-built. So there is a process, and we typically include that when we see expansion occurring where there is on-site septic.
Okay.
So it's a.
Well, I just didn't see it in there, and that's, the objective is not to leave a
It would
loophole.
require is a standard stipulation when we see any expansion on a site that's served by on-site septic.
And so the last one is just about 10.8.14.3.2, and if I remember correctly, the reason we were going up to 1,000 feet, that's a pretty big unit, was because of, okay, bigger lots. So is,
It's only allowed in the bigger lots, yeah.
okay. Okay. All righty, so let's get to the, so 10, on page 8, 10.8.14.3.3.3. So I wanted, I'm all about height, and my concern is there's nothing in there, and it may be somewhere else, about what's allowed in that particular zoning. So a lot of GRAs have pretty low ceilings on their height, and they're measured to the bottom of the roof. So if I remember correctly, midpoint on the roof. So my concern was that it doesn't seem to say in here that you also have to meet the zoning requirement, the height requirement for the zoning that you're in.
At the very
Does that say in the
At the very
beginning?
beginning of the
Okay.
ordinance, it says that.
Okay, good. And that's part of the list of you have to follow all the rules.
Yep.
So 10.8.14.4.1, I don't think there's a 1.225.
Oh, because we changed in the table.
Sorry, where are we?
Page 8, last one.
Page 8.
Yeah, so we took out 1225, so you need to make that 1224 now.
Okay, yes, great.
Good catch. You know, we make so many changes to so many of these things.
Yes, I know, it's okay. That's why I read them. Sadly.
We miss it.
So on page 9, we're just going through here. Let's do 4.1.2. I just thought you could reword that to say, and this is just my idea, in no case shall a DADU created from an existing accessory building which does not comply with minimum yard requirements for a principal structure be larger than 600 feet gross area. There just seems very wordy there. And then 4.2, I'm doing the editing on you, a DADU that is created from an existing non-compliant accessory building for the minimum yard requirements for a principal structure shall comply with the additional requirements. That's just my,
Say that again?
okay.
She's just moving where comply goes.
So I wrote a DADU that is created from an existing non-compliant accessory building, get rid of all that other stuff, for the minimum yard requirements for a principal structure shall comply with the following additional requirements. You can type it up, and I'll give it to you later, and then you can look at
It
it.
sounds more complicated to me, but
Okay.
I was thinking the same thing.
Did not exist before. That's because you understand all that stuff in between there. So the last part of 421 on page 9, I didn't see it in, I have a 2015 zoning book, but it says, except that the planning board may grant a conditional use permit to allow the gross floor area of an accessory building to be expanded to a total of 600 square feet. So what came to mind was, is some of the houses have the old cottage, the old garden cottages. And do we really want people to expand those or to continue to use them as a garden cottage? And the reason I say that is I have an old fishing shack on one of my properties, and my neighbor doesn't like it, but it's too bad for him because all the people who've lived there all their lives remember that shack being put out on the water. So I keep it in its original form with the shake shingles and stuff like that. But my concern is if you allow someone to enlarge the footprint of a garden cottage, they may not be in an HDC zone, but it just seems like it would be a shame to do that. Just saying. Something that Nick can think about for a while. Because it's going to, we had a neighbor do a garden cottage in our GRC loan, and she kept it just like it is on the outside, but it looks cute.
I mean, Liz, I think that works if they're big enough. A lot of garden cottages are not residences.
Right, but but they're allowing them to get bigger. We're allowing them to build.
Go in there.
Yeah.
The complaint is that a lot of these are being used and they need more space for ADU aspects, and so that's why we said they could go up to at least what the maximum
Right.
is if the existing structure is smaller. And that was the reasoning behind it, was to
Right.
try to be more flexible for those that might need a little bit more space for ADU compliance
And it is a
inside.
conditional use permit.
It would be a conditional use.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a conditional use permit to
Okay.
do it, yeah.
All right, let's see. Okay, so in the same thing with the architectural standards, I appreciate all of them being put in there and very specific, but again, old cottages don't necessarily look the same as buildings that have been recited and stuff, so I didn't know, but I think that's also a CUP in there. But the architectural design, sometimes you might want to leave it.
Well, they're also part of, even if it's permitted, if they're going to make some sort of change that is allowed, it has to be within
Okay.
this too.
So if they
All
have
right.
siding, or if, we talked about
Right.
that at the beginning,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
So page 12, so I'm going to tell you my story now. So I have property on Clinton Street, and the house next door to ours said, we're going to rebuild the house that's there. We want to know if you're going to give up 5 feet of the setback. So I said, sure, no problem. And then a few weeks later, I saw a sign on their garage. I couldn't see it, but I thought it had to do with the fact that they were going to demolition the side of the house to put in this garage. I couldn't get to the sign because it was at the end of it was on their house, which sits back about 25 or 30 feet. Now, I'm farsighted, but I did not understand or see that sign as a close basis. So I'm thinking the sign thing doesn't work, because I was horrified when my tenant called me to tell me that the house next door is completely gone. So I really feel strongly that notification of people who live on each side of their property, across the street, next door, and behind them, should be done by mail. They could have some kind, the city could have some kind of write-up or whatever, and then the person asking for the ADU, should have inside the letter an addressed envelope to the city, to the planning department, with the application number or whatever. I know when you go to get a permit, you have a number, with an application number on the outside of the envelope, and it should be stamped by the person sending it, so that those replies to those letters go directly to the planning department, so that there is no, the guy next door is on vacation while you have your sign up, and they get back from vacation and they don't notice your sign. I really feel strongly that if anybody's going to make this kind of a change, it's going to change a lot of people spend a lot of money to live in a single-family home area because of that.
But these notices are only for uses that are permitted, so it's no outside changes. So these
It
aren't
says
the kind of-
attached or detached.
Right, so we allow some detached, but the building, the structure that somebody's going into is already there.
Right, but you didn't have somebody living there before. It was just a garage. Now you have somebody living next door to you. So it's a whole different feel.
I think the idea is that it does allow for a challenge. So, if there is I think when we kicked this around, it was trying to see how do we process, direct public comments if they're submitted to the director and there's not really a response for them. But we want to, this is, I think, of the 2 barriers we removed. I'd say that we've introduced a lot of standards that really sort of clarify how they should look, clarification of the way it's, I think the improvements to the structure have been better. I think there's been a lot of new protections put in. This is probably one of the 2 barriers that it's only for things that are not growing in their footprint. We struggle with how the director or the planning staff, because it usually is the planning staff that works on it, would deal with those public comments. And so this became a way to give an opportunity for a challenge, because people should be aware if they would like to challenge that administrative decision, and it was to create that opportunity for an administrative challenge.
Right, but I don't think you're going to know it's going on.
We can add language about it should be prominently displayed to the traveling public. I mean, and
Well, we
It's on the
actually
perimeter
already
of the site.
do that, and I can just say on Clinton Street, that did not go through the Demolition Review Committee because it went through the Board of Adjustment. And thankfully, I hope the City Council fixes the error we made a few years ago in exempting projects from the Demolition Review Committee that had been to the Planning Board or the BOA, because this is how these things slip through the cracks.
Right.
Don't get the big sign that's not easily missed, that has to be posted in a conspicuous place with evidence submitted that it's been posted. that was not the Clinton Street experience because, again, it went through the BOA, so there, I don't even know what kind of sign, if any, was ever required. It wouldn't be for demolition, so I can't think of another city sign.
Right.
But,
It would've just
other
been
than
a
the building
BOA.
permit that's this
Yeah.
big and goes in a window.
Right,
That's not what we're talking about here. The
Right.
signs
But
half
I'm
the
just
size of
saying-
your table,
right. But they had that kind of sign on St. Patrick's School.
and it worked.
And because it was right,
Well-
was right next to the sidewalk.
We had it on the Cary Cottage, which is a mile off the road.
Right.
And it worked because we put one out on Little Harbor.
But you put one out on Little Harbor as well. Like I said, my concern is that if you go on vacation when the sign goes up, you may not realize that sign is there. So I really feel strongly that it should be notified by mail.
Notice,
You're
yeah.
talking about 4 people, front, back, and 2 sides, and they, I'm sure, will tell their neighbors if they don't like it. But it's a very big difference to me as someone who lived in a GRC neighborhood, and Liza lived next door, and we literally could hear each other, what we said in, you know, you can, if you're having a
consider.
conversation in your house, you can hear it. So that's a big difference between having a single-family home.
So there's one other thing I want to introduce as part of the signs, because it is a standard practice of it, is that it does tend to invite a broader response at times, because everyone in the traveling public can say, ooh, what's that?
Right.
So often, the signs, I was surprised we didn't do signs here, but I think the answer is that we do a butter notification than the state requires in Portsmouth, and that, I thought, maybe was the trade-off there. But the signs tend to reach a broader range of people because so the abutters are the most obvious people, and it's
Right.
hard to miss a big sign in your neighbor's yard. But I think they always notice if the house is for sale. Believe me, that travels through the neighborhood quicker than anything. So that never seems to. That's usually on the neighbors the entire neighborhood's on fire when that sign goes up. But I would say that it reaches a broader range, and it does create for the planning staff, although the planning director is listed, a pretty high bar that the standards have to be applied pretty faithfully or pushed up to the planning board. It does. Everybody who drives down that street will see it. Can call
If
in.
it's on the edge of the street.
We agree that we all want to see it in a prominent place.
They have to give
an
us
obligation.
notification that it's
Right.
readable and
Yeah.
shows that it is. So-
Right.
So I think in a way, it can be at times a more effective way to notify the public.
Well, then I would like to have it added that this
Direct abutters be notified.
the direct abutters be notified, and that the sign is at the edge of at the street edge.
It says it's at the perimeter of the site, so it couldn't be posted on the
Yeah.
house.
Rick, we'll look at the demo review committee language that might be a little more specific or different. And
Yeah.
Well, this is the site plan review language, so it should be the same thing, right?
Oh, don't count on that.
yeah, I
I
bet
wouldn't
they are.
count on that either.
May I ask a
Just look at
question?
it.
Sure.
Did the neighbors that tore down the house come talk to you
No,
before that
No.
happened?
literally, no. And they didn't talk to our tenants either. They work from home, so they didn't talk to them either. So I know, and I know the neighbor on the other side was just as horrified. So no. It all sounds good on paper.
Sign of the times, I guess.
Sign of the times, that's right.
Any other feedback? Because we're now. running out of time.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to have gone through it line by line. I thought that subordinate should be defined and.
Where are you?
I'm looking at the definitions. I didn't see that, I don't know if subordinate is defined. I didn't look that up. I didn't have enough time before I came. And the roof surface thing, I think, is defined in the ordinances. Is that correct, Nick? Because you guys talked about.
Whatever the definition is in the ordinance, if there is one, it will be consistent with the dormer requirement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All righty. And that's it for me. And are we going to look at this again?
The planning board.
Planning board,
No,
city
before
council.
planning
It's got-
board.
Before planning board? I don't know. We haven't made that decision yet.
Right, because I was at the meeting where the people got the one by Barnaby Lane, that one, and the neighbors had a lot of important things to say about that. And I lived down the street for over 35 years of the White's boarding house, as well as the Brewster Street boarding house. It was just down the street before you moved in, and it was a nice neighborhood. And it does have a big
No,
impact.
I've been there since 2002.
Oh, yeah, I thought you moved in after that.
No, no, no. I've been
So,
there
that's why
20
you were
years.
across the year. So you remember
don't
Brewster
mind.
Street. So I think that
was on
that
Gunner.
some
Yeah.
assisted living places, but they all come with people who have to take care of the people who are there. So if you have 5 residents, you have 5 caregivers. So there becomes a big parking issue, and there becomes a lot more people than you necessarily think about.
That's not actually the case. The caregivers, I can tell
They don't
you,
stay there, but they come and pick up people and do things like stuff like that.
people come and go, but regularly, if you're talking about people that are on site, it's usually like 2 to like 10 to
that's-
16 people.
Right.
So
Yep.
it wouldn't be 5 people for 5 people.
But those 5 people are coming and going through your neighborhood. Unlike when you have a nursing home, you have the staff that comes in at 7 o'clock, you have the staff that comes in at 3 o'clock, you have the staff that comes in at 11 o'clock. Those all impact a neighborhood in a very different way. I like the idea of the Spalding Turnpike, though. Thank you.
Anyone else? You might need to shorten up the time to let people speak.
I just want to know, I have to leave at 10:30, so I just wanted to make note of that before.
I'll try. Liza Hewitt, 726 Middle Road. I want to thank you. I know you've put a lot of work into this, and I know that you've listened as well. I've met with Nick a couple of times, and he was very patient with me explaining things. I probably have a couple more questions, but a couple of comments. So I appreciate you putting in the intent. I saw it, and I've been asking for that for months. I have a little bit of a concern about the intent and the way it's worded. So I'm all for this section can address the housing needs of a range of community members. Correct. Great. The standards in this section are intended to integrate affordable housing into the community with minimal negative impact on the surrounding neighborhood. I just wonder how you can justify saying that. I think that makes a great splash headline for the Portsmouth Herald. Let me finish before you say anything. I don't think that it's realistic. I think that we'd all like to think, yes, they're going to be less expensive than what's at West End Yards. And that may or may not be true. But when I look at the fact, and this is just, if that ADU costs you $200,000 to build, which I guess it could conceivably cost you, and you're looking at getting your money back in 5 years, I mean, that's realistic, right? You're going to be charging $3,300 a month. That to me, and I think Mr. Welch would agree, is not deemed affordable housing. And I think, we do this a lot. We throw out affordable, and $3,300 I don't think would qualify anywhere as affordable. But I think it's realistic to think that people are not going to be putting that much money into an ADU and then out of the goodness of their heart charging $1,800 a month. So I think, again, splashy headline, great, but I just would encourage you to really think about putting this right in here.
This actually comes directly from the state model that came out. This was their exact intent on the state level as to why to do accessory dwellings. So we didn't come up with this language. I just basically took what they wrote and took out some of the detail that I thought was unnecessary. Other than that, this is truly not our language. It's language straight from the state.
Then maybe we should
And I'll
put
just
in
say
our
that
language.
the term affordable housing, I know it gets confusing. All that means is someone can afford it. It doesn't mean any specific individual. It doesn't, you know what I mean? You can't define it anymore. It just means that someone can afford it. It is more affordable than something else.
I think some of them start out as units that do support family members, and then they think it could add value to maybe the resale of their house. We do see, I think that we have seen applications for them. So I think they start out one way. Sometimes they can be a different way, and I think that we need to be supportive of that, because somebody lives in that type of unit doesn't mean they're not the kind of neighbor, they're a neighbor that we wouldn't want to have. We can have a bad neighbor in any kind of unit. So I do think that there's lots of reasons why people might do it, maybe to generate some additional income. Maybe also, I think I've seen also that the primary resident, who is the aging person, might move into the ADU, and then the larger house gets rented, and it creates an opportunity to basically age in place for that person. So I think there's a range of uses that these provide for the community. It diversifies the housing stock, so that is one of the other goals, is diversification.
Right, and I'm all for that. I mean, I'm not against ADUs. Anybody, I am not against
I know.
ADUs. And that would be the first. It addresses the housing needs of a range
Yeah.
of community members. That's great.
I'd
It's
love
the
to say
next
something to
part
that, yeah.
that I have a little bit of an issue with.
Yeah.
That's all.
Liza, can I just respond? Because I was the one that blurted out when Liz said something about the main objective or the objective, and I didn't know where you were coming from, but it's this paragraph, so I apologize for saying it's A. But my position has been from the beginning, it's a priority to address housing affordability. We've had this conversation.
We have.
I would personally reword this to say something like, the purpose of the section is to provide for additional modest dwelling units within single-family neighborhoods in order to, A, increase the supply of smaller, more affordable housing without the need for more infrastructure or further land development, B, to meet local housing needs, or C, provide opportunities for adaptive reuse of existing buildings, accessory buildings. This is multifaceted. So if this is the state
Or
language.
de-diversify the housing inventory.
Yeah. Yeah,
And all of that, I think, is good. I just.
yeah, no, it's
I
good. It's a
just
good point.
think,
I think those
Not
are
just
all-
affordable housing.
I think all those are
Right.
good.
and I don't
Yeah.
think that you can
I
assume,
wrote it down. Yeah.
again, I don't think that you can assume that
I'll send it to you.
ADUs are going to be affordable. I just don't think that you
They'll
can,
fix
and I
it.
think it's a mistake to put it into your
I
ordinance.
think we could add those changes.
So another question, I was confused. The current ordinance talks a lot about minimum lot area, or it talks about it. I had a hard time finding it in here, but it sounds like you're going to be looking at that because that's what Liz brought up. So great. I love the qualification, I have to say, of entire building. Adding that definitely was an improvement.
When is that?
Just in general, when you talk about,
We say entire
you know, the building footprint, all of that.
Accessory
Not just
buildings.
Yes, not
That might
just
be
the
the
ADU.
Hewitt amendment to that.
It could be.
Hewitt codicil that we did to
Lord knows that I've mentioned it a few times.
tried to tackle that one.
So the building footprint, 2,000 square feet, that includes the garage, is that correct? Or is that only living?
Which number?
Sorry, brain dead, Liz.
Yeah, we look at this so much, we don't.
So
Okay,
it's
it's on page 10, halfway down.
435, yes. That 2,000 square feet, because I was trying to figure out if it didn't.
Entire
Yeah,
building.
yeah, that's the entire
Yeah,
building.
Entire
yeah,
building.
Entire building.
Okay.
And that's not the footprint. That's
No,
that's
the
gross
footprint is
Well, that's the
750.
GFA, yes.
Got it.
Gross floor.
Yeah.
So I just brought just a brief show and tell, because being a preschool educator, that's what I do. So this is 26 square feet, this is 26 feet high. This will be what looms over my backyard.
How big is that building?
It's about 4,000 square feet.
So that
Will not be.
that would not be
Twice
allowed
the
in our
size.
zoning ordinance.
These are too late
Twice.
yeah.
Yes, okay.
But these respond to
We're
that.
making
know,
the
but-
changes to fix that. That was one of our wants.
Exactly. But that's why I'm bringing
That won't
this
be,
up.
that wouldn't happen
So
again.
this, but it is 26.
Yeah.
26, okay? Feet tall.
That's-
These I
is that-
took from
is that
around
the-
town.
Is that the allowed height in your zoning district?
No, it's 35.
35, okay. so it's
35
less-
is allowed.
It's less than is allowed, okay,
It's 6 inches lower than the principal building.
okay.
4 inches, but who's counting?
A few.
So
Can't remember.
this was taken off of Austin Street. I mean, it's bigger, it won't be able to be this big, but the
16,
roof
yeah.
is, it's not 3 stories high.
Right.
This, to me, is a 3-story high building. This is off of Greenland Avenue. Again, you can see that it's not this tall, but this tall is what you're proposing. And
It's actually what we're allowing, not what we're proposing. You know, people could build any of the ones you've just shown.
Yes.
That's the ceiling, not the floor.
I know, but I
Yeah.
don't want this to be the
I
ceiling.
understand, but there's a
Just
lot of.
saying, just saying, don't
There's a
want
lot of
that.
other things that keep that.
I
from
want
happening.
this to be the ceiling. So I'm going to leave these for you. I know you probably already have it, Nick, but I really hope that you will look at that 25 feet again, because nobody should have this across the driveway looming over their backyard. 25 feet is very high when nothing is there existing. So please look at that. Still have some problem with administrative approval. Just have to put that out on the airwaves. The public notice, we were away when this was proposed. I had to come back, travel back from my vacation to speak at this meeting. If you are going for a thing at the end of the driveway or wherever you're going to put this, I think the perimeter, I don't want to nitpick. You could put it on the perimeter in your backyard. Nobody'd be able to see it. So you need to be very specific about where the perimeter is and where that's going.
We're hearing that loud and clear, I think, yeah.
We'll double check to make sure it's in the
I
requirement.
like the thought that you will put a butter front, back, side, and send it by certified mail. I think that's only fair. And it does not state how long it needs to be sitting out there. So it says before the it has to be out there before the approval. That's confusing to me. So is that,
Before the application.
before the application?
That's what it says.
Okay.
Because the
So
idea
what
is
if
they
the
can actually appeal the building permit.
What if the application, but what is the period of length? So
Once it's approved, I think, we would,
So how long are you leaving it out there?
typically, once
Should
we
be
receive
30
the application, it's 30
Should be 30
days.
days.
That's a pretty
Minimum
typical
of 30.
standard, and then we don't make a
Can you
decision.
put 30 days?
Yes.
Think about
We
putting
don't
30
make
We're
a
going to look
days
at
in
the
there.
language of the other and make them
I'm just thinking
consistent.
like a half an hour, I just want to make sure, because I'll be honest with you, we're hearing over and over again that, and you brought this up, abutters are not being spoken to. Neighbors are not talking to neighbors. My neighbor did not show this to us. We just got an abutters notice. It's happened in other meetings that I've watched on television where neighbors are concerned that they have not, it's not been brought to them. So how can we make sure that this is happening? I think that's only fair. If these are going up, you need to make sure people are informed, and however you can do that. Certified mail, front, back, side, and the person applying has to pay for it. What's that going to be, $10?
So I think the only thing that we've really struggled with is how to manage the comments, but it could be that they're notified of their rights for administrative appeal. I don't know. We could talk about that because it's when the comments come in, then there's not a forum to address those. So there has to be a faithful execution of the standards, and if there isn't, a sense that, for my part, if I wasn't sure, I would just take it as a CUP. I would take it up. But I think when what we were trying to do is make sure that they were aware and could challenge the decision, and that puts a level of rigor on staff to make sure that we have a faithful explanation of how the standards have been met. The challenge at that point would be, a tough case to make if we say here is exactly how they met all the standards. So I hear what you're saying. It was the comments about how to manage comments without a forum and the responsibility of what to do with those comments, but it could be a notification that just says the decision will be rendered no earlier than this date, and you could appeal it to the Board of Adjustment if you maybe.
So maybe if people have comments, it does go to a board. Like
If they
maybe
appeal
that's
it.
just,
If they
Well,
appeal
we
it,
go to
then-
the BOA at the.
Yeah.
or the Board of Adjustment,
Right.
and they could challenge that. But the idea is that there would be, that we would do a review of the standards against, and this is no new construction, so it does kind of lower the bar a little bit. But I appreciate that comment. We hear it. We're trying to be
I can
faithful
see
to
that
the
you-
intent, but we're also trying to be faithful.
you obviously put something in there, so you know that it's a concern and you know that you need to address it, and I appreciate that. I just think it maybe needs to be tweaked a little bit, and I think that you do respect the fact that, for me personally, I'm coming from a position in which this really went terribly wrong, in my opinion. And I want to make it better. It's too late for us. It's too late for my situation. But I want to make sure that it is the very best situation, as long as you're taking all this time to do this, for the next person that comes along. So that's why I bring it up. And then my last thing is just parking. You took out a huge section, and I know you're referencing standards. For me, I'm not like Liz. I don't have it all memorized, so I don't even have the place to go and look for it. the bottom line is that that has not changed. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have not changed the parking. They still have to meet the parking.
And
Can I just say something that wasn't intuitive to me till I talked to Rick about the parking regulations? And maybe it's something we can make more explicit. But if you're required to have 1.3 spaces for your 780 square foot unit, it actually rounds up to 2, not rounds down to 1, which is
Everything
what I would have thought it would have done, but
Okay,
I
that's
didn't
what
read
you
it carefully
explained to me,
enough.
I
Yeah,
think.
so I misspoke.
There's no 1.3. Yeah, there's.
Whenever you
There's
get,
two.
that,
as soon
but
as
there's
you
no
get 1
rounding
point
down.
something,
As you're
you
over
round
one,
up.
You have 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
so why don't you just,
Because when you have multifamily units, I think
and you're
there's.
The way the addition
but this isn't a multifamily. I
So
think it
you're
would be-
always going to need 3 spaces for a single-family house with an ADU. And I didn't realize that.
Then I think just put that
Yeah,
in
it
there.
might be good for us to make that clear here in this, or.
Well, just
yeah,
put it in here.
Yeah.
Just put it in
At least here.
That there's
I thought there was a standard saying there should be a minimum of at least one.
There was, we took it out
Oh.
because I put it in there thinking
we just
it
said
was
it
done
had to meet the
differently.
regular
Yeah.
standards.
Okay, very
So
good.
I think it would be helpful to put it in there. And I also think it would be helpful because, as you listed at the beginning, foremost among abutters' concerns.
This is true.
Parking. So, make sure those abutters know that if you have a 2-bedroom apartment that people are requesting to put in as a DADU, you can take the parking concern right off the top. You don't have to come in and complain about the parking because they do have to have 2.
And that,
You
that
know.
came up with the abutter survey, kind of makes me wonder, if there's maybe spillover parking that's happening. I don't know what's happening that came up. Because that was always kind of in there, that expectation. So I am curious about that. But yes, I think we can reemphasize that.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you very
you so
much.
much.
Thank you.
I do hope that with all of this discussion, this will come back before you. I know you don't want it to, but at the beginning of November, so we can have a look again and just make sure that it's all in there and it's clear to anybody else before.
And
it
Liza, I
goes.
hope we can count on you when this does go to the planning board to talk about how responsive it's been and how it's really reflected all the comments we've received from both because I'm going to do a matrix to summarize that, but I think that we've struggled really to address the goals, which are the balance, which is always a trade-off, but then also to incorporate what we heard and what we've heard through this forum. So I hope that we can count on you to let the community know that we've really tried, and this is a standard for, I think, moving forward on other regulations. So thank you.
Will you consider 25 feet? Is that even a
I'm gonna take-
consideration?
Well, it already is 25. You mean
I
consider
mean,
changing
lower
it?
than changing the 25 feet?
I'm going to look at it. I definitely think the 2-story image you've got on the top is pretty horrific to have next to somebody's structure, the one right there.
Because it's 75% of the principal.
The roof pitch
This?
is, no, the one that's actually
This.
got no pitch to the roof, I don't think is an attractive building. I'm not saying it's horrific, but I think we need to be, I think there's a possibility that we could live with something 2.5 stories that's closer to 23 feet. I know.
So-
So yes, we'll look at it.
So,
okay?
Councilor Moreau, just because I do have to leave at
Do you
10:30.
want
Forgive
this?
me, Counselor, I have to.
Sure.
I did want to ask,
Liza,
when
the
you do
answer's
move
yes.
to,
Look at it.
when you do move to consideration, that I would ask that you send it to if that's your choice to move it forward today, send it to the city council and request that they refer it to the planning board and bring it back for a first hearing. So if they combine that motion, which is what I like to include in my memo, then I don't have to bring it back an interim time so that they can schedule that first hearing. Does that make sense?
So it's got to go to planning board
Yeah.
and then.
That you are referring, that you recommend that the council refers it to the planning board and that upon recommendation of planning board, bring it back for a first hearing. That way I can just,
Bring back for
I have
first
the
hearing.
authorization to do both those things, and we don't have to have a meeting to bring it back for the first hearing. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Because I will probably jump out in about a few minutes.
You can.
Can I start?
Yeah. I'm just trying to write down my notes.
Just waiting. This is public comment. Peter Huda, 280 South Street. So the first thing, I'm trying to summarize everything that I heard here and that I had written down in my notes. The first thing that I would ask you is to get back to some basics here. I went and pulled the law, 674-71, that gives you the definition, and I'm struggling with what is written in here, how the uses of single-family dwelling switch to principal dwelling, switch to accessory dwelling. To the layperson, me, this is very confusing. And the specifics of the law basically outline in I don't know how many places single-family dwelling. So that would be the first thing I would ask. I know Nick went through and changed a lot of this to principal dwelling, and I do have a question on that one. I'm in an area where a principal dwelling next to me is a condo. It was reclassified as a condo.
These aren't allowed to be.
Okay, hang on. So one of them is a single-family house. The other one is classified as a rental. So when you say principal dwelling, if this person moves from his principal house to the other thing that is another dwelling, does that mean that this can be added on to that dwelling as written?
No.
No.
Because the word dwelling to me means something different than single-family dwelling. So I definitely wanted that clarification just for everybody. The other thing is I would ask, I know the discussion on this is all about CUPs. The language that was in the law was by special exception. That would delineate ADUs getting a CUP specifically using the language that was written in the law. So, and everybody would know it because it would be in your definitions. So that was the other thing that that I would like to request. The next thing, I agree with Liz on 10.814.133. The language in this where you switch back from accessory dwelling to principal dwelling to structure to, it's very confusing, to just building is still very confusing to me. Let's see. I would ask on any place that you put in that you're going to do a CUP as an exception, it be labeled as a special exception again. The other thing, I guess, on number 10.81432, where you're going up to, you basically tell them that 700 square foot is what they should have, which is what is in the law, and then you're going to say you could get a CUP to keep going up. From my perspective, 1,000 square feet is too big. It's
what's permitted only on the larger lots.
okay. That's the other thing on the DD detached. This is up to the municipality. On detached accessory dwellings, a municipality is not required but may permit detached accessory dwellings. So the municipality is dictating this. As a resident, especially in the historic district, some of the houses aren't this large. And then when you go back and you talk about it being up to 2,000 square feet with something underneath, that's bigger than my house. So basically what you're adding is another house to this lot. So I'd like you to think about that. And the wording in there, the wording in here is also very, very confusing. The wording in 10.814.332, the addition or expansion of an existing building. I don't know if building is described in square feet. I think Nick say, it has to be over 100 square feet. Does this mean you could add to any building? I mean, can I have a shed? Can I have an outhouse out there and it's considered a building on the lot?
No, this is to the principal dwelling.
Okay, so here again, instead of principal dwelling, single family dwelling. And some of this, it's just inconsistent, and you switch back to single family and principal dwelling. Another example, 10.814.43. And then finally, I would ask you, I strongly support what Liz said and what Liza said, and I would bring your attention to the 225 Wybird project that just came in front of the planning board. If you had an administrative approval on this, which to my knowledge it would have passed, it would not have gone to the abutters for comments?
It's a new structure. It would
Yeah, that
never have
wouldn't have
been
been.
permitted. Administrative approvals are only for existing structures within.
With no
There's no
expansion.
expansions whatsoever.
Okay, so there's two
those
things
are-
there that still, I think, justify the notification of abutters. It is still changing what's in the property, and it still affects the parking of whoever's there, because you still have to provide parking. So, I mean, as far as Mr. Bergeron, Brenner, and Anderson had said here, we are only now looking at the storm drainage because they brought it up. It wasn't brought up in the original thing.
It's not in our original code. We're adding it to this.
I know you're adding it to this, but if this came up and it went through administrative approval, I don't think they weren't notified, they would have no idea. So my point is agreeing with both Liz and Ann, and also I would call your attention to the due process of right to public hearings. This is in the Constitution, and this is due process of law. Due process to public hearings. The only time where there is a constitutional right to be heard at a public hearing is during a public hearing concerning a matter which affects a person's property rights. This affects all the abutters' property rights. And I don't think we want to go into any of this, but a person's property rights are very important to all of us. And it seems when we're looking at this, we're protecting the rights of the person that wants the ADU, but we're not protecting the rights of everybody around them. So I would say that to put a sign out that could or could not be seen by that many people doesn't matter. I agree with the abutter should have notices, and I think it's their right to have a notice because it affects their property.
We will take a look at it.
The other thing is, I noticed, like Liza said, you pulled out all the parking requirements. And exactly what Liza said, if it's, instead of saying 0.5 of a parking spot, just say 1. I mean, make it simple. I'm Polish, keep it simple for me. That's what I want to see there. That's all, and there would be no questions. So, I mean, whether it's 1 or 2, describe it in there and just let it go. And lay people will understand that. We won't have to go cross and go back to the laws and see what everything else means. Thank you.
Could I just say one thing? The issue about special exception versus conditional use permit. The law says that municipalities can require it by either conditional use permit or by special exception. And the reason we had conditional use permit is if you make it special exception, then it goes to the zoning board.
Right.
The planning board can't have any role in a special exception.
Which is
So
why we chose
we
this.
thought that the planning board would be the more appropriate board to deal with it than the zoning board. And state law does allow the conditional use permit as the first option.
So we can't use special exception.
Okay, so then my question would be, is there any other wording that you could put on here that would differentiate this from a conditional use permit for extending a lot line, for a wetlands permit, some other wording that would apply only to ADUs that the citizenry would be aware of? And the rest of us would be aware of?
It's the same thing as for a wetland. It's not extending a lot line.
Same findings, right?
Same findings,
Same
yeah. so,
findings, yeah. We're under
So,
the same,
yeah.
conditional use permit can be for many different things, right? Conditional use permits can be for wetlands, it can be for
Yeah.
ADUs, it can be for,
Yes, a special exception is actually not appropriate really for this because it's
And
so
the-
limiting.
right, and special exceptions are actually easier criteria to reach than a conditional use permit, which is why we went with that as well. It actually
It's
gives
stronger.
it's a stronger standard.
So there's no way basically at all to differentiate that this is only related to an ADU?
That's what it says. It just says it's a conditional use
Conditional
permit
use permit
for
an ADU, or a conditional use permit for a wetland, or a conditional use permit for
Okay.
whatever it is, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a great day. All right, last discussions amongst us. I know that we've made several changes in the
Amongst
last.
us. The three of you.
The 3 of us, 4 of us that are left here, okay? Just to sort of wrap up, I know that and I'm sort of looking to Rick to help us out and you, because you had some changes to,
I think I've got 5 5 items we were going to, maybe there's 6. So let me just recap them, right? Because I went
Go-
through it.
go
I'm
right
not going to
ahead.
read them all. We're going to attempt to rewrite the purpose and
Yes.
intent section. I'm going to take the lead on that. Number 2, we're going to take another pass at minimizing some of the confusion, if we can, between dwelling, lot area per dwelling unit versus lot area for the lot, the issue Liz brought up.
So perhaps delete that last sentence.
Perhaps, as long as it doesn't
I have
create
that
another
note as
problem.
well.
Number 3, we're going to revisit or clarify what the notification or documentation requirements are for the owner in that annual certification.
You want to do
Or
that
deed
in zoning?
restriction.
Well, that might be, yeah.
The deed
Want to do
restriction.
documentation in zoning, or is that?
Should be
Well,
a
it-
deed restriction.
Well, we either go the deed restriction route, or the documentation just needs to be clear here what it might mean. Even if it's a reference to some moving target in the planning department, it should say that. I think it needs to be clear what is the documentation that one would be expected to provide before you even ask for this permit. That was number 3. Number 4, I'll fix the easy one there, the 1, 2, 2, 4.
4 instead of 5, yeah.
Number 5, consider lowering the maximum allowable height for the ADU detached. I'm going to look at that and share whatever I find with everybody. I don't think it can go down a whole lot unless somebody wants to get rid of having an attic over
Right.
a second floor. But
Well, it would be, over second floor.
Yeah.
I mean, you could get rid of having an ADU over a garage. That'd be one thing you could.
well, it would
yeah.
still be there, but it would be like the second image that was shown, which has the dormer in the roof. You could still do a 16, 17-foot, anyway, it's how limiting we want to be here, and that's the conversation we've got to continue. Number 6, that we make explicit, as we had in the last version, the parking requirements for an ADU. And then, number 7, just taking another pass at the sign language, the notice.
Just
and
making sure that our
make-
requirements
yeah.
already do what we think they do.
And if they're inadequate, let's make them better.
Make them better,
Yeah.
yeah.
That might be it for my sheet. I think so. So that's what I wrote down. It doesn't mean I got everything.
So Rick, do you think we need to get back together to go over all that and those changes again?
You mean as a group here, or?
Yeah.
I think we can review these of course, I'm just a consultant. I think you could have another internal review to make the revisions before bringing them forward, if that's appropriate. It seems like we're getting really into
We're close.
fine details.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you want to wait another month or not. So-
Right. Or send
Might
it
be
forward
nice
for a
not-
public hearing?
It might be nice to have a cleaner document to submit for a public hearing than be doing it in transit.
What do you mean?
Well, if we adjust these 7, 8, whatever it ends up being.
You want to bring it back here one more time?
Is there harm in doing that for just?
Just keep in mind how many months it'll take to get to the public hearings on it.
Yeah. I'll see, it's your call, but if there, I don't know
It's your
that 30
call.
days is.
It's not just my call, it's
Well,
everyone's call. What do you do?
I think it's smart to do our due diligence and keep it clean and.
Keep it here until we get,
After what I
See
just
how
went
many-
through on the building height,
Yeah.
I'm an advocate of.
That's what I like to happen.
It's a night.
Cross all our Ts, dot all our Is, and then we'll move forward.
all right, so Rick, we'll get together and,
Yeah. with
And
one-
then two
Over
additional
this.
minor wording changes, which
Yep.
is the delete one and one and only one, to change it to only one.
and let's just be consistent with what we're using for the principal dwelling unit. Make sure, because does say existing building. I think it should say existing principal dwelling, maybe, when we're talking about the attached ADUs. I don't know, we can just look at it and see, make sure we have.
There's a, okay. I guess I'm just worried about making it
I
less
know.
precise. And then the other one is change roof surface to roof plane.
Yes.
Right, yes, the roof one.
And I think it's worth, maybe I missed it, but looking at being more explicit about the 1,000 square foot maximum in the table of uses as a footnote,
Yep.
as Liz pointed out.
All right, we will bring it forward next month, November,
For the last time.
for the last time, I hope. Hopefully, we'll have it at that point. Any other questions, concerns? If not, I'm going
We'll
to.
do the same with the assisted living, right? We'll
Yeah,
bring
we
that
can
back
bring
for
that
the
back.
final.
Yep. Although there was just that one change to the assisted living from not a permitted to special exception
Right.
in the GR.
Can I suggest, if folks in the audience have feedback on the assisted living, we maybe get something in advance, if possible, so we can maybe move them both forward at the next meeting? I know you didn't get it till either today or yesterday, so.
us to email you
Email it to me and I
Yeah.
can make sure it gets to staff.
Yeah,
at the usual address?
Yeah, my
Yeah.
work one, yeah. I just use my work one for everything. All right, if that's all, I am going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you,
So moved,
everyone.
yeah.
Have a great day.